Although Jesus instructed us to count the cost before following him as his disciple, it's not often that we hear teaching on what that cost might involve. However, in our gospel reading we've just heard today, that cost is set out in dramatic form and leaves very little scope for misunderstanding. Whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. But before we dare to speak of the cost of discipleship and the cross we have to carry, we have first to make clear that Christ has taken on our cross as his own. His cross is unique, borne not on his own account but for us and for the whole world. We are but followers of the one Lord Jesus who poured out his life for us. And the call to follow Jesus is a call to share in his suffering. The suffering that comes our way as a result of serving the mission of Christ. We often hear people say that we've all have our own cross to bear, and by that it is meant that the deck of cards that we've been dealt, the aches, the pains, the bodily afflictions, and the tribulations and losses that may come our way. But that is not what Jesus intended here. Anyone who suffers pain is connected to the one who died on the cross. But the suffering Jesus speaks of is a suffering that comes as a byproduct of living intentionally as his disciple. We're bound to find that the idea of a man hanging on a cross as God's plan for the salvation of the world stretches credulity. It sounded foolish in the early church, and it does so no less today. However, if we believe it, we nevertheless know that we're likely to be met with ridicule from those who do not share our belief. I'm sure we've all suffered from that. We don't look foolish. So when we're at the tennis club, the golf club, or enjoying a relaxing meal with friends, the easiest course is to keep quiet and avoid the division and possible rejection that speaking up for our faith might bring. And this is the first example in Jesus' teaching of what suffering might mean. We might call it distress. And our Christian convictions are counterintuitive, and yet we will not be recognised by Christ as his disciples if we refuse to witness to them in the public square. And that witness of Christ is something that I've become more confident about in recent years. I didn't used to share my faith or the fact that I had a faith with people where I worked. But over the past few years, particularly as I've gone into worship leading and local preaching, I've become more open about it. It's on my CV. My managers and my colleagues know that I'm involved in the church. They know that I'm attending Methodist conference in a couple of weeks' time. And I'm much more confident to share my faith, despite knowing that I work and know people of other faiths and of no faith. And actually I find, on the most part, and in fact the vast majority, are very respectful of my faith and what I do with the church. But at least people can coalesce around a peace-loving, moderate, popular view of Christianity, can't they? But no, they can't. Jesus declares that he hasn't come to bring peace, but a sword. The world's powers are being contested by the invasive power of the kingdom. Disciples of Christ are expected to mobilise and follow Jesus into the courts, debating chambers, political forums and social media channels to expose, ridicule and disarm the coercive, self-serving forces that have free reign across the world. We must expect that when powerful vested interests are challenged, they will abuse, threaten and seek to silence those who call them to account. But then Jesus turns to the domestic arena. Conflict within families, between children and parents, not because of hormonal excesses, but because a family member has become a Christian and is following a changed lifestyle that the others find disturbing. Harry and his family had led a relaxed, indulgent life. But when Harry became a Christian, all that changed. A friend half his age would often be called on to adjudicate by his family on the perceived reasonableness of the new Christian regime he wanted to impose. He was now purposeful and driven by his faith, no longer the carefree man his wife had married, and he suffered the fallout from the reaction to his newfound faith and the struggle to keep his family on side. Jesus now focuses down on the individual. Where in the pecking order do our nearest and dearest come in relation to Jesus? You may have been involved at some point in a group exercise in which you're asked to write on small cards or post-it notes the 5 or so most prized things in your life, putting them in order from the least on top to the most valued hidden on the bottom. People are then invited to give up their choices, beginning with the least painful loss, placing the cards to one side or up the front on the altar or on a table. And even this ritual action becomes unbearably hard. But that is the cost that Jesus is asking us as his disciples to reckon with if we wish to be his followers. Jesus as King must reign preeminently in our hearts. The manner of Jesus' own living and dying presents one further way in which Christ's disciples must suffer. We are expected to emulate the love, life and service we find in Jesus Christ. But love exacts a cost. It can tear our hearts to pieces. It can bring the pain of rejection. But even when we are rejected, even when we are subjected to use, abuse or hardship, we're to act to absorb the hostility and not pass it on, and to call down God's Spirit so that we can be forgiving and so that we can help to break down that downward spiral of hate and evil. We're not promised protection from the pain, the emotional pain, the physical pain, the intellectual pain that can come from following a crucified King. But we are promised freedom from fear. We're not offered deliverance from pain, but we do believe that dying to self is a necessary cost of coming alive.